Hey everybody, here's the deal podcast. I've got something today that I think you're going to really enjoy. You know, there was a book, maybe some of you got it years ago, the Book of Lists. And in there, you know, you have categories and what was number one, number two, and there's all these categories. Who was the best, like, football player of all time, or the best basketball player, baseball player? You know, a lot of us like that kind of stuff. USA Today will do that oftentimes, and, you know, who sold the most records of all time, and, you know, basketball, was LeBron James the best? You know, I came from Cleveland, or, you know, Michael Jordan. And so people, you know, they try to come up with these lists, who was number one. But you have to have some solid substantive criteria. And, you know, when you read a book like this, they try to do it that way. Well, I today would like to share with you very clearly on who was really the greatest president in America's history. Now, there was a poll done among college students recently, and guess what? The award for America's greatest president, the president that was number one in the history of America, you know who was listed? College students said overwhelmingly, oh, Barack Obama. Now, you might say, yeah, I think so, or I don't know about that. But you know what? Today, what I'd like to do is take a look at this objectively. Now, I can tell you right up front, I prayed for former President Barack Obama every single day. I'm part of a ministry, Intercessors for America, and we motivate and inspire and equip people to do so. I respect him as an individual that, you know, God has given charismatic abilities to. I thank God that he has a wife and children and an intact nuclear family, and there's no doubt of his communication and charismatic skills. But when you're evaluating a president, you have to look at objective criteria. Now, I would just like to mention to you, there is a president that I highly respect. I'm not saying he was number one, but historians will say he was one of the best. I have a picture in my room, and it's autographed from Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan lived during a time where, after Jimmy Carter, our country was in a malaise. It was in a mess. And yet this man came into office, and he restored, in a statesman way, America, its position on the world stage. He oversaw the denuclearization, you know, the missiles that were going with the Soviet Union, the Cold War. He brought about, working with Gorbachev, the end, literally, of the Berlin Wall. You may remember his statement, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And so that which divided Germany came down. We saw the end of the Soviet Union as a communist empire. So when you look at Ronald Reagan, you say, whoa, those are monumental achievements. How about Abraham Lincoln? Well, the Civil War, divided nation, all the hostility and tension, and he walked us through it. It cost him his life. How about George Washington, our first president? You go to Washington, D.C. I lived there 24 years. Now, folks, the college students were asked, but Barack Obama, he was cool, man, I like that guy, you know, his wife, and you got this stuff, and, you know, he had like twice the number of votes than George Washington. And then you see like FDR, John F. Kennedy, they're way back in the pack. So what I'd like to do is just talk for a few minutes and then refer you to the news services where, you know, we put forth these commentaries. Charisma News, WND, Intercessors for America, Engage, the Millennial Outreach with the American Family Association, and other news services. Because there are many in academia, in universities, in colleges, and many in Hollywood, and then individuals that are really strongly leftist. They want to see a transformation of America. You may recall that was how Barack Obama began his entire terms. Remember that? He says, this is the fundamental transformation. But was it a strong and healthy fundamental transformation, or was it tearing down our original values and the vision and the heritage of our nation? Well, that's what we've got to look at, and I give 10 reasons why Barack Obama was not the best. I submit, I think he was the worst. And this is criteria, because there's a hoax that is prevalent that somehow he was this great president. Now, you know, back in the 1930s, after the Depression, economies were in shambles in places all over the world. And in Scotland, they were suffering. So somebody, you know, we don't know who they all were, maybe in a pub, drinking a beer, he said, hey, let's come up with some, you know, hoax that we can draw tourists here. So they came up with this crazy idea of, let's say that there's this giant behemoth, you know, a Loch Ness monster that's been sighted. And they even faked the picture. And you know what? Scientists debunked it. They discredited it. They said there's no such thing. It has no basis in reality. But do you know, for decades and decades, millions of people believed that it was a hoax. And I submit to you, there's many people that are believing hoaxes today in a similar way. And I do not believe, based on criteria that is solid and objective, that Barack Obama was some great president. Let me tell you why I think he was the worst. Number one, he said he was a Christian. That's what he said, a professing Christian. But when you are biblically informed, you can see Jesus gave 7 clear characteristics or criteria for a true disciple. He said, no man can be my disciple if X, Y, and Z. And as you'll see in the article, you can look it up, he basically fell short on all of these. Many people say, well, he said he was, but so do a lot of people. Number 2, Barack Obama, if you recall, when he was debating and he was being interviewed for the presidency at the beginning, a tremendous man of God, Rick Warren, asked him questions. One of them was about marriage. Do you believe that marriage is between a man and a woman? And he said, yes. He said, yes. He was clear. And so a lot of people said, good, I can vote for this guy. I can stand with him if he's going to uphold marriage, which has been intact worldwide for over 5,000 years, according to God's design, a man and a woman. But you know what? Once he came into office, that went out the window. And his senior advisor, David Axelrod, in his book said, oh yeah, he lied. Now what does that say? What kind of reflection on character is it when somebody on a monumental issue like marriage lies to us, and then when he gets in the White House, promotes it, is aggressive, intentional, and then when there's a decision, he lights up the White House to celebrate this. Number 3, how about the sanctity of human life? I don't believe you can really be a born-again Christian and not stand for the sanctity of human life. And yet Barack Obama, in a similar time, was asked by Rick Warren, what do you think in terms of a baby and conception? He said, well, that's above my pay grade. In other words, he dodged it. He didn't want to give the answer. But boy, once he got elected, do you remember how aggressive and intentional and proactive he was in this area? When he was leaving office, he met with Planned Parenthood in their convention, and he said, God bless you. Now, the Bible tells us that in so many passages that we defend human life. When Mary was with Elizabeth, it said the baby leapt in the womb, the baby. And our culture says, hey, baby bump, she's going to have a baby. But now we have a Democratic Party that's literally 70 times said, even if a baby is born alive after abortion, no, just let the baby die. In other words, that's called infanticide. So we've had a spiral from abortion to infanticide, and now we see the sanctity of life diminishing in America as we see physician, promoted and accepted suicide. This is serious, folks, and much of this you got to lay at the feet of Barack Obama. How about when he talked about the economy and made a promise? He said, we're going in a recession and all that. But after my first, term, he says, we're going to cut it in half, the deficit. Well, the reality was when he left office, not only did he not fulfill that, but he went from 10 trillion to 20 trillion in the national debt. That's very serious. And about, 47% of the debt came on his watch? Entitlements, giveaways. That's serious stuff, and we still suffer with that because of that to this day. How about health care, Obamacare? Do you remember that? Well, you say, well, it's being dismantled, and we saw, all the fraudulent stuff, and, it's been called the lie of the decade when Obama was pushing this Obamacare, health care for all system. And you remember what he said? He said, if you like your doctor, you can keep him, and the average family is going to save $2,500 a year. Well, the reality was when they pushed and prodded it through, guess what happened? Well, we saw deductibles and we saw things skyrocket, and that's why it's being dismantled even to this very day. But these are policies, these are positions. The Bible tells us that we're to stay close and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We've maintained our strongest ally in the Middle East is Israel. But with Obama, tension, division, hostility, animosity, acrimony with Benjamin Netanyahu, who is such an ally and friend. What is going on? But see, in this administration, we saw these kind of things. We saw some lawlessness being promoted that we suffer with to this day. You may recall when, a lot of, police enforcement in the middle of somebody getting shot, and what happened? We would see right on the scene, our president would make statements that somehow would engender suspicion about law enforcement and police. And so to this day, that can still be there in this country. Folks, I list in this commentary 10 reasons why I believe Barack Obama was America's not best, but the very worst. I love him. I'm not opposed. And I know he's gone on to success today. He's raking in the money, he and his wife. And you know what? We have a president that is trying to rebuild. He's a reformer. And I want to, if I can, just in closing today, I want to make mention there is a new book. I'm privileged to have an advanced copy of this book. And it's by a man named Steve Strang of Charisma. You're familiar. And this book, I'm reading it right now. It's called God, Trump, and the 2020 Election. Boy, is this a good book. I want to recommend it. It's going to be coming out by Steve Strang. And we're learning in here how we have to rebuild and restore so much in our nation. So here's the deal. Every one of us should be praying for our leaders, pray for godly leaders, and also stand for the original values and ideals upon this nation was founded. We have a stake in this. It's our children, it's our families, it's our future. Stay strong.